See, I told you. Said it exactly like how I said it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hey, how's it going?
What's up? That is Zach over there.
Yep.
Over there.
Yeah. Who I think when Zoom records this, I think when we record this that it like I have to check the footage, but so far I've seen that it automatically cuts between us, and I'm not
That's right.
sure. I'm
So
not
what
sure
I'm
if
doing is
it'll.
kind of ridiculous.
Yeah,
I like,
yeah.
well, the thing is that like I'm so used to it. It comes from our mutual friend Tren,
Hmm.
because he does this whole like,
Right.
like Hollywood Squares
Brady
thing where
Bunch.
like
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
doing, yeah, exactly, where he's just like looking up at me this way, and I like, so I'm kind of like,
I
yeah,
think it makes it
just be
even
aware,
funnier.
people watching, we're both here, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
We're on the thing.
Yeah, it makes it funnier if you point and but you're the only thing on the screen. I think it's even better. Great.
I'll
Yep,
just
and
start pointing
that's
towards the screen. That's
yeah, and that's Greg, who is a writer and many other things. What's your shirt today?
This is my Fantasy Matters shirt. This is actually the first fantasy convention I ever went to,
Oh wow.
when I had not yet quite signed a contract for my first novel.
Hmm.
And it was called Fantasy Matters. It was a one-off. It only happened one time, and it was
Wow.
in Minneapolis, and it was run by this guy Jack Sipes, who's a pretty well-known academic, that does a lot with fairy tales and things like that.
Hmm.
And Neil Gaiman randomly showed up because Neil Gaiman
Oh
lived at the
wow.
time in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and so he showed up, and he literally like, and this was small. This was like maybe 200 people at this con, and he shows up and he's like, well, I'd like to read something a little interesting, hopefully, that I've been working on. And he begins to read this thing. In his hand, he had a knife, and it was the opening of the Graveyard Book, which became this like massive bestseller
Wow.
for him. And we were just like, and my connection to him was through one of my field exam advisors at Brandeis, a guy named Dr. Levitan, had consulted with Neil Gaiman on his Sandman comic about Shakespeare. So it was all this like
Right.
wild stuff based on this tiny little con called Fantasy Matter. So yeah.
Those last couple sentences there, you were dropping names that you're just like, yes, my when I was at Brandite and doing this thing over with the companion clause, and he can advise for the Shakespeare summary, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I was like,
You're
okay,
like,
great,
sure,
yeah, cool.
whatever. Yeah, no, that's yeah, it was interesting. He was and Neil's a really nice guy. I actually met him later on again in person at a Worldcon in Montreal. And I was
Hmm.
randomly on an escalator behind him, and I just was like, "Oh, hi Neil, you don't remember me, but like I had stopped to talk to you a little bit about Alan Levitan." He's like, "Oh yes, Alan Levitan." Like this guy sees like thousands of people. Like all of a sudden he just randomly remembered. So very
Wow,
nice guy. And a good writer. Good writer.
that's very cool.
Good writer.
Okay,
Did you know, by the way? Actually, I'm sorry. I promise we won't spend the whole
what,
time on Neil Gaiman.
what?
But I just remembered because you, as I can tell from the Avatar Legends thing behind you, and we've talked
Hmm.
about this, but you also are a fan, yes, of Princess Mononoke.
I
Or
no, I've
Oh,
never seen
okay.
it. No.
Okay. All right. Well, very, very well known anime, kind of
Hmm.
Western anime. I shouldn't call it just anime. But anyway, I found out today, I was today years old when I found out that Neil Gaiman actually did the American translation script for that. And I
Ah,
had no idea that was the case. And the reason I don't know is because his name was stripped from it by Andrew Weinstein, the guy who is now in jail after multiple
you mean
sexual
Harvey
harassment.
Weinstein?
I mean, sorry, not Andrew, Harvey. Yes, sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, it's
Wow.
just like there was like all these mind
That's
blowing things. I'm like, what?
interesting.
Like, yeah,
Huh. Yeah,
unreal.
no, I've heard the name Princess Mononoke, but no, I've never I really, other than Death Note, and I've watched a couple episodes of My Hero Academia
Yeah.
and Beastar.
Hmm.
Beastars? I forget if it's plural. It's been a while since that came out. Enjoyed that, but no, otherwise, there's people that are like Attack on Titan, Bleach, Hunter
Yeah,
x
yeah.
Hunter, all that. Like I've never,
Cowboy
I,
Bebop.
yeah,
Like,
no,
yeah.
never gotten into it.
Okay, okay,
JoJo's,
all right,
so I don't know.
all right. I have to remember it's just Avatar: The
Sometime.
Last Airbender. That's
Yeah, yeah, that
its
is
own
its own thing. Yeah,
its own thing.
but yeah. Okay, so
Sorry to get us off tangents. My fault.
no, I think it's fine. So my question for you, and of course, our dear viewers, we don't tell each other what our questions are going to be and therefore have no preparation other than the moment. Not that our questions are presidential, game changing, life changing, world rocking questions.
What is the Polonase bond broken when bad memories of 10th grade chemistry?
Okay, so my first question for you is, if you think about your time playing tabletop games before you had children and then now after you've had children,
Mm.
how do you think it, in any way, fatherhood has changed how you run games? And perhaps to offer a direction for that, has there been anything thus far that you feel like your children have imparted to you that has somehow affected how you tell stories? That may
Wow.
not be the case, but I don't know.
Boy, this is good. This is good stuff.
Yes, sir. I
I'm
try.
hit with the depth.
Hmm.
Well, okay. So
And don't forget,
one,
we can edit this, so you can take as much time as you want to think.
no,
I'm
I
just
know.
kidding.
Like I should just do this
It's
thing and
depth,
then
and
like
then
an hour later.
you just sit
So I, like I
like a
come
chess
back with
match. You just sit there contemplating your move for 30
come
minutes.
back with my full script. Yeah. No, well, okay. So one thing to say is that so my writing improved substantially. I mean, I think I was a good writer. I've always been a good writer. I think I
Hmm.
became a considerably better writer than that even when my daughter Sunavine was born. And it was because her birth kind of her presence sort of tapped into this part of me that I knew existed, but was maybe a little bit afraid to access. It's not the whole thing about feeling feelings and the typical macho nonsense like that. It wasn't that. It was this sense of um, concern of commitment. And I'm going to tie this into the game mastering thing in a minute. Embarrassment. I got bullied when I was a kid, and there were all kinds of things that went on with that, and I
Hmm.
was worried about putting myself out there as a writer. And the reality is that you can't really be a writer that does anything really good if you're not willing to be vulnerable at a certain level. If
Yeah.
everything is just sort of like what I call the hermetically sealed piece, where there's nothing technically wrong with it, but it doesn't do anything, you
Mm.
know. It's like I don't know. It's like mid-level eggs. You're like, these are fine. Like they're not terrible, but you don't remember them, and like
Yeah.
they just exist. They don't like, oh wow, what a great meal. They're just there.
Hmm.
And that's the thing about the hermetically sealed essay. And a lot of my writing, I think, was technically very good, but I don't think it had
Mm.
enough sort of emotional kind of component. And with the birth of my daughter, that changed it to an incredible degree, where I felt much more willing to be forward emotionally, and I think it meant that I wrote stuff that mattered, much more. And so it's no accident then that a lot of my sort of professional writing career, from a creative point of view, dates after her birth, right? So
Mm.
the third son comes out in '09. That's a year after she was born, and then that was the first one, and then Icarus is 2013, and Gray Shade in this form is 2019, 2020, and I have all these short stories coming out during that time and everything. And the my academic book, I guess, came out 2007 before she was born, but again, that was an academic book. That wasn't the creative stuff.
Mm.
So from a game mastering point of view, I think that's very much what I learned from both of them. If you're unwilling as a dungeon master, I think as a game master, if you're unwilling to commit, if you're unwilling to truly role play the character, and again, there are different styles, so I don't mean you have to become, Matthew Mercer or whatever. I'm talking about, though, investing fully in the emotional content of a game or the emotional content of a character. If you're not willing to do that because you're worried or you're embarrassed or you're afraid that it's going to come off wrong or people are going to make fun of you or whatever,
Then just
um,
have a child.
yeah, have a kid and then this solved all the problems. No, because because like when you're with kids, like first of all, kids, when your own children, they don't do that with you. Like you get to, this is one of the reasons I think people like kids, because they get to go places with them and act, like goofballs, and they
Hmm.
get away with it because they're with kids, although secretly they probably want to do that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
secretly, and so I think that's one of the reasons is we sort of fully invest in our emotions. And as a game master, you can run, and I've seen it done. You can run games that are very much like 10,000-foot view, like they're all up here. And they're fine. Like you'll run them and people will go, "Oh yeah," and then they'll forget about them in 2 weeks, right? But the games where you're like truly emotionally invested in what's going on. We were talking a couple of shows ago, I think, about the show with Espergenesis and the roller coaster thing that you and I did
Hmm.
role play wise, right? Like that's stuff that people remember. It's stuff that they hold on to. It's stuff that players will remember. Hopefully, certainly I, as a game master, remember those moments much more than just the kind of, and the funny stuff too. But it's stuff that sort of moves the needle. It's not the just like
Yeah.
zzz,
Yeah.
kind of safe sort of stuff. So I think the birth of my kids taught me to take risks, because they change the perspective of what matters. That's a thing. But
Hmm.
also because they're just so themselves emotionally rich and invested in what's going on. They're like the ultimate example of mindfulness, right? Like they're very much about the present moment when they're younger.
Mm.
And that really can be inspiring as both a parent and a person, but it's really inspiring as a game master to sort of stay very present and with it. And that has a huge effect. So yeah, I think I learned the importance of commitment and being present in the play, and not sort of thinking about like, okay, well, if we could just get through this, then maybe the game will get interesting 6 days from now or whatever. But like
Yeah.
fully investing in whatever the players are doing, even if it's not the exact thing you imagined. And that really is meaningful, and doing so without fear of embarrassment. That makes a huge difference. And I think I have my kids to thank for that. So yeah,
Wow.
that was definitely the case. I mean, you, because you've been working with a young demographic for a long time,
Hmm.
maybe not as young, is what I'm talking about. But did you feel like, was there a stage where you grew up enough that you felt like you could commit more, or did you never have this problem? Maybe this is just my problem, that I was just, always worried about showing my hand too much or something until I got older.
I think it's it's continuing for me. I feel like I'm still going, and I'm sure for you too. I mean, as your kids get older, you're going to learn different and more things too. But
Hmm.
um, I mean, I started working. I started teaching kids, middle school kids, when I was still in high school. So I was still 15, 16 years old,
Right,
and got
right.
lucky enough to get this job teaching the drumline for kids that were only like 3, 4 years younger than me. And basically since then have always worked with kids that age. Now in the capacity, I don't teach drumline anymore. But now in the capacity of D&D, which I enjoyed even more than drumline. So yeah, I think I mean, it's different because they're not my kids. But in some ways, I think in the ways that any teacher out there, including yourself, would say, working with your students, yeah, they're not your kids, but you're getting a perspective on a different generation, especially
Oh yeah.
as the distance between me and my students. I feel like that's what I'm going through right now, where for the longest time I was still kind of uh, definitely within the age group and the generation of my students, but now
Sure.
that gap is starting to widen past the barrier of the next generation,
Yep.
um and so it's interesting to always to see how they view the world and their perspective, and their heightened emotions. I was trained in leadership for all 4 years of high school, and uh, also teaching kids for so long too. I've something I've learned from working with them that I then also incorporate into my GMing is sometimes when you're that age and there's the beginnings of an argument or something, I think there's always this knee jerk reaction by the adult in the room to immediately intercede and administer some adulting
Right,
and
right,
separate the argument and stop it.
right.
And my practice for quite a few years now is to be like, well, I think probably the best thing I can do is the fact that I'm in the room and that I have the power to stop it and bring some maturity or, some, make sure everyone is okay. Obviously not talking about physical fights here, but um, I let those disagreements play out because if they can handle it without me intervening, then that's a level of adulthood that they've just achieved.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
And that's also applied in my DMing, where I think it has a lot to do with the idea of like, listen more than you speak. And so I really, when I can, especially if there's RP moments going on between players, I try not to intercede all the time,
Definitely.
like,
Definitely.
oh, you hear a bird chirping in the distance, or I try to, shift the scene or anything. I don't do that stuff. I just try
Yeah.
to let
Yeah.
it play out. But um yeah, that was everything you said was very poignant. I think there's a certain part, even though I work with um, kids anywhere from 8 to 12 in my program in San Francisco, and then I still volunteer at my high school, so all the way up from 14 to 18. It'll be different for me, I think, if and when I have my own kids, but I think too, maybe your son is too young for you to impart this to him at this age, but I'm not. Do you think that your daughter knows about the effect that she has had, even maybe not
Yeah, because I told
purposefully? Okay, all
her.
right.
Yeah, because I've told her. I mean, she's like, we have, like people will, as people watch this show go on, they will hear me make this reference on multiple occasions. But like, she really is kind of the light of my life. Like
Hmm.
she is. I mean, it's been an honor to be her dad. And it's not always easy, because
Yeah,
she's 10th grader, and she goes through different stuff, and she has not been one of those like hermetically sealed kids that you're like, what's going on below
yeah.
the surface? Like, you can tell when stuff goes on. She's an exceptional student. She's a really wonderful kid. And so, yeah, I've been very honest and open with her, frankly, in ways that my parents were not with me,
Right.
and that has been hugely like affirming both for her and me. And I think it's just like, I mean, to go back to the D&D example, like that's something which has become, you gain, as you get more experienced in this, you gain more facility in anything you do. You gain more facility, you gain more confidence. But it also means that because you have a certain perspective, that, for example, the fight you were describing, or the argument is not necessarily, in fact, it's not even likely to blow up into this massive, like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's especially less likely to do that if you allow people to kind of work their way through it.
Hmm.
Right. So if you're constantly jumping in the middle of it and they don't know what they can handle and they don't know what they
Right.
can manage,
Right.
that's when it becomes much more dangerous later on, when they're just like, "Rah." But, and that's the same case in sort of a D&D context. But man, and group therapy has a very similar dynamic to this, where the group therapist, their job is not to jump in when the group is having conflict. Their job is to kind of
Mhm.
let it play out unless it gets overboard. And then, then they have to kind of direct.
Right.
And that's, man, I mean, as a teacher, as a game master, when I was younger and less experienced and more less confident, I was not great about that. If I saw conflict happening, I jumped in immediately because I was very afraid of what was going to happen. And it wasn't fair to the people involved. It was really being, in a way, I mean, I didn't mean it this way, but it really was patronizing,
Hmm.
like you can't handle it. And the reality is that, like, they can handle it. So I have, very much like you, I mean, I've learned very much to kind of like step back. People know on stream, when doing streams, that whenever I do this and I just kind of go back like this, that is a sign that I am now stepping back because I'm really enjoying what's going on and I'm just sort of letting it handle. And we sort of fade as game masters into the background, to let them kind of work things out. But I don't know. I mean, like, that is not something I had the confidence to do when I was younger. And really, I mean, I've been DMing since I was, I don't know, 15. So I've
Mm.
been DMing about the same time, probably about the same time actually that you were doing some of this yourself.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had the confidence to really kind of take a step back and to do more of the serious stuff, and the kind of extended campaign stuff was not nearly as much a big thing as it was kind of a monster of the week type stuff
Mm,
in the 80s, when I was growing up, with learning it.
yeah.
But regardless, beyond that, I was not going to jump in until I got much older and more confident about what people could do if you just gave them a little bit of space. So, yeah, it's a good question. It really is a lot about it's a lot about gaining the confidence and the sort of wherewithal to be able to take moments and let the moments breathe. And a lot of that again is learned because of working with my own kids. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's it's interesting about how those things can kind of change over time. It also means we get to emphasize again the generation part, because now he was like, "Who's the older one?" Gee, I wonder. Well, you see, my children, now that I have a high schooler myself,
Oh
which is
yeah.
mind blowing to me, by the way, that I have a high schooler. Like that's,
Gosh. Yeah, just blink and she'll be in college.
yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yep.
All right, question for you.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't my question is not as deep. Let me tell you, that
No
was
worries.
as
My
that
second
awesome one
question is
was.
also not as deep, but
So this question is actually, I just today recorded the session 0 for this game for Beowulf Age of
oh.
Heroes. And it is a duet system. And as I was talking to the two players, Tren, who you know, as we talked about before, and Tari Tunes,
Hmm.
I was talking to the two players. This is going to be the last time that they're going to be on the cast on the show at the same time, because it's a duet. It's me and one player. So they're going
Oh,
to be doing their own parallel adventures. It's in the same world, but they're
interesting.
not like going to be meeting up with each other, although there will be moments where they probably will cross over, maybe at a certain
Oh.
prominent charity convention in May, for example. I can see that happening, you know, but they're in their own separate tracks. So what I wanted to ask was, so a duet system I've wanted to try for a while, and there've been a couple occasions where I did some like version of this with maybe two people or whatever. And I had to adjust, I had to like adjust the monsters and the challenge ratings, whatever, on the fly, but you can get a feel for that. But it struck me that when I first started way back now in the mid 80s with the Red Box, right?
Hmm.
I was basically, I mean, I didn't have a group of people together that I could do this with. And this is way before internet or Zoom or, and
Right.
video calls or anything like that. So eventually I was close enough to people that people could come over and we could play, but not when I first started playing. And so I ended up doing basically a duet system
Hmm.
with myself and sometimes my mom, but more usually my father. And I still have like character sheets of his character that he had like written
Wow.
and all that stuff. And he was very, I don't think he knew. I mean, I don't think he really understood the details about what was going on in all of this, but he was very indulgent or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So what I want to ask you is, do you think we're used to thinking of these things as party based, group based, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've done up as many as 9, although that's too much, but usually,
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. Um, what do you think about a single, a person to person, GM to player kind of environment? Have you had occasion to do anything like that? And what do you think about, would you rather have large groups of people that kind of bounce ideas off of, or would you rather have the focus maybe that a single player and single GM duet thing could provide?
Yeah, this is you'll also find a very contemporary question for me because I may actually be doing this soon with my home group. Um, to speak on that real quick, I'm been homebrewing. I have so many ideas. I've been homebrewing so many different campaigns, and I finally stuck on one. And
Okay.
it's been a while since my hometown group of friends have all played D&D together, and I haven't DM'd them in years. The last time we played together, it was on like two of the other people in our friend group have kind of been the forever DMs for a while. I
Hmm.
haven't DM'd these guys in a long time. And so the thing is most of us are like, okay, we've found a day that works for our schedules, except for one person, and we
Of
all
course.
really want everyone to be there, but it's become a thing. We're all adults with jobs and everything, and so I may end up running for the majority group, but then I was like, I could totally do a one-on-one session with my friend Elijah, and he can play like a power player in the campaign setting, or like what the rest of the party might perceive as an NPC. that like affects and is almost like a
Oh,
mover and shaker
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
in the environment, and then they don't
yeah.
even know that Elijah controls that person that they hear about is, doing these raids on this thing or whatever. So that's something I've been thinking about. But I have done this before, and I'll share some brief stories, I guess, about how this has happened as far as quantity changes
Okay.
between D&D. So starting small, um, the very first time I ever played D&D and was introduced to it was actually a duet. So my friend Silas, who I haven't talked to in a long time, he lives out in Utah now. I think he has a family of his own and everything. But he came from a big family himself, and he wanted to introduce me to D&D because he thought I would like it. And so this was in high school for me, and before 5th edition had come out. So this was 3.5 because
Mm-hmm.
not many people wanted to play 4th edition. And so I just came over, and he was like, let's try D&D. And he pulled out the 3.5 edition, and he was showing me all the characters and everything. And uh, I was struggling to figure out what kind of character I wanted to make, because I
Uh-huh.
wanted to make something new and distinct. I didn't want to just, so many times when I run the game, someone comes in and they just make themselves. And I think if you're completely new to gaming, like, of course, that makes sense. You're going to find a way to just kind of insert yourself into the situation. Makes sense.
Yourself with like a cloak and a badass like
Right.
weapon or
Yeah.
something, right? Like, I
It'd be
mean,
like if I play D&D and I name my character Zakai, the Slayer, and it's basically just me
the
but a tiefling.
Claire. That's what
Yes, the Clayer.
yeah.
Um, but no, I wanted to play something that was new and distinct to the experience, and so I wasn't really convinced by any of the races or species that were shown. And just out of curiosity, I was asked if I could look at the monster manual, and so I started flipping through the monster manual. And one of the first creatures that you can see in the monster manual is an Azer. A for Azer. It's right there at the beginning of the book. And Azers, for those that don't know, are basically like fire elemental dwarves. And I thought that was so cool. I was like, can I be an Azer? And of course, my cut to my friend Silas being like, you want to play a monster from the monster manual? But he, as a good DM would, he was like, you know what? All right, you'll be a dwarf, and you'll be a paladin or a cleric that can like activate a fiery ability to be an Azer.
There you go.
And so he must have run for me maybe 4 or 5 sessions, just solo, and he had a whole map of his world and everything. And I'd love to talk to him sometime about remembering that experience. But yeah, he was literally my first ever dungeon master. But it was such a brief experience, and then it obviously wasn't this sort of classic picture of D&D that we see with a group of people, and so
Right.
I think it was a little different. But no, it was great, and I say bridge to a meaningful point, I suppose. The great thing about running for one person or just having a one-on-one session is that one person gets all the attention.
Yeah.
Now scaling up, the more people you add, that means the more the spotlight has to split. And so,
Right.
in a 4-person game, you can have some time where 2 players talk to each other for 15 minutes and have some role play, and the other 2 players just sit back and watch. But now imagine a table of 6 or 7 or 8. That can't happen as often, or as long. And talking about scale, the largest D&D game I ever played was when I was in high school. My senior year of high school, I was the drum major of the band, about 100-person band, and so I was like the guy in the band. I was the leader of the band, and so of course, when I came up with this idea of like I want to run D&D I want to introduce D&D to so many people because I had started like fully playing it. I was like, band kids, come over to my house. I'll run D&D for you. Let's try it. And of course, my friend Silas was also in band, and my friend Jesse was, best friends with Silas and also played D&D. So the three of us were like, we're 3 DMs. We can handle whatever band kids come over. So 20 band kids come over, and we have not learned yet that character creation takes a long time if you don't have pre-generated characters. So we did, I think, 2 sessions with 15 to 20 people all at once in one group.
Wow.
And
So wait,
at my
one big
house.
group and the
One big
three of you.
group, and the
Wow.
three of us were trio DMing. We didn't really know what we were doing. It's astounding to think back on, because if we had continued to try, I think it would have been really cool. But it was mostly kind of crazy. Um, I guess before I get to my closing thoughts, I was reminded of this too because, as I mentioned to you, I just went to go see To Kill a Mockingbird in San Francisco just this
Yep.
past weekend with my family. And when I was on the ferry that sails into San Francisco,
Hmm.
I ran into one of my old band classmates who's actually was in my same grade as me and Silas and Jesse and all them, on the ferry, him and his family, and I hadn't seen him in years. And as we were catching up, like, what do you do? What are you doing now? What am I doing now? So of course I talk about D&D stuff, and I was like, "You ever played D&D? You ever want to get into it?" And he's like, "Nah, the only time I ever played was that time you did it. We did it at your house with 20 people." And I was surprised he remembered that.
Wow.
Um, so it must have been significant because that's almost 10 years ago now. But anyway, so yes, I have done much in the way of scale. The other thing that comes to mind is I had another friend who, I am really in love with, Ravnica as a setting for D&D.
Hmm.
It's a Magic the Gathering
Yep.
plane. And I had another friend who was really into Magic and really into Ravnica. And he was like, "I'd love to play," but we figured out scheduling to get him in a group wasn't going to work. So we had both heard about, play by post, where you play by posting and typing, and then the other person just goes in whenever they have the time and type their reply. And so I created a Google Doc, and that was actually a really cool experience. Basically, taking everything that I would say verbally as a DM and putting it to the page, and then adding images, as an opening scene, and then just linking him the Google Doc.
Hmm.
And it was funny because his replies were always like one or two sentences. So I put, like,
Well, I
five,
was gonna
six
say that's a lot of
yeah,
work from you. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
put
yeah.
5, 6 paragraphs of, like, here's a newspaper that was just published within the world. Here are the top 3 articles, and I typed the top 3 articles of the newspaper.
He's like,
And
I walk north.
yeah,
I walk
exactly.
N.
Yeah, I put all this work. I was like 2 to 3 paragraphs just describing the room he was in. That is the start of our
Yeah.
adventure and his goal, and all that stuff, and a picture of, like, from a Magic the Gathering card that I knew he'd recognize from Ravnica and everything. And then he's like, "I've responded to the doc," and I'm like, "Yeah." And I go in, and it's like, "Yeah, I go north." And I'm like, uh, but so then I type another 5 paragraphs of epic description, and I still have that document. I'll have to pull it up sometime. And this is not a dig at my friend, because, to be honest, in his, position, yeah, I put him in a room. What else is he going to do other than move somewhere to start doing what he needs to start doing? So
I don't know. He could be like, I walk carefully with
yeah,
precision,
yeah,
looking at each direction.
yeah.
Like,
So I've done that, and I may be doing that pretty soon here, because I have a feeling that, like I said, I'm going to be starting a home game again, and I have a feeling that one or two of our usual group are might be out. So either we're gonna do one-on-one D&D, or we're gonna try a play by post thing. Um, but yeah, I really like the idea. Yeah, one-on-one stuff is great. I'd love to do it more, to be honest. And the the benefits of just being able to focus on one person, and scheduling with one person, and story focus for one person. They do miss the aspect of role playing with other people, but the idea of the GM is that you can play many NPCs anyway. So honestly,
yep.
it's kind of an exercise as a GM, to not exactly replace the other players, but in a way, that interaction is solely focused on you now.
Definitely.
So, so yeah, I love it. I'd love to try it more, and that's really cool what you're about to start. I didn't know we had talked about, and you brought up the Beowulf system, but I didn't know that it was. I don't remember that it was a Duet system. So
Hmm.
that's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be really, um, gratifying and, like, personal for Tren and for Tari. to
Yeah,
be able to do that.
I think so. And not, I imagine that not every person could probably sustain it. And certainly not every person could sustain it in an entertaining way, like in a live stream sort of
Right.
context. But both of these people are experienced role players, and I've known them for many years, and so that's that won't be a problem here. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to try it because it does allow you to kind of, I mean, first of all, yeah, you don't have to herd the cats of like getting everybody
Right.
together for the
Yeah.
scheduling, but also, it gives you an opportunity to kind of really sort of trace out stuff that gets lost when you're like, I don't want to spend, because there's also a favoritism thing, right? Like, you don't want to be
Hmm.
seen as like, this is my favorite character as the GM, and so I'm going to spend like an hour talking to them about what matters while everyone else is just sitting around. Like,
Yeah.
technically, you want everyone to be present and engaged even when it's not their character on stage. Like, at its best, you
Hmm.
want people to also be really looking and kind of being interested in the role play with others. But as a GM, we have that internal clock where we're like, yeah, but it's taken too long. We got to get some other people. We got to get other people on stage. We got to get more ensemble stuff, so, and here you don't have to do that. I mean, here your attention is focused solely on what that person is doing. So I'm actually looking forward to, this is the first time I'm ever going to have done a campaign of something like this.
Wow.
And so it'll be interesting to see what that's like. I mean, individual sessions, as I say, I've absolutely done duet stuff before, but not on a campaign level. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that stuff kind of ties together. And they have a big thing in there where they're like all this sort of rule orientation about how you could scale it for groups. And I'm like, yeah, but like then you could just play D&D. Like, why, one of the big
Yeah.
appeals of this is the fact that it's focused on one person, and it's hero, the emphasis on hero in heroic fantasy and all that,
Mm.
so yeah.
I think it'll be cool too, given that you're running in tandem with both of them, kind of simultaneously, but not at the same time. Just the idea of like, if Trent's character sets a barn on fire or something, and then Tari's character is walking through, and you're like, and you see a barn is on fire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like well, one of the things too is that Trent's character, Trent's not 100% sure like how anti-monster he's really going to be. There may be
Mm,
a little bit of like Geralt and The Witcher sort of like understanding where the monster's coming from type of thing. So
yeah.
we had this image of like, here's these two ends of the whale road up in Scandinavia, and here's like, Tari, who has no such compunction. Like, her character's monsters are just dropping, dropping, dropping. Well, like Trent's characters are like going up this way in terms of like number of monsters and everything. And
Right.
should, just be like, why are there all these monsters still coming into my region? It's like, so, but it'll be
So,
fun. I think it'll
yeah.
be fun for people to also from a world building point of view. I
Hmm.
think it'll be fun for an audience to see these different elements and different worlds constructed and explored in a different way because Tari's character is different than Tren's character.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to kind of see how the world that you create can manage both of those characters rather than just tailoring it around the one single person alone. Having those two characters being able to sort of find different parts of the world explored through them, I think is interesting. So,
Amazing.
yeah, it's going to be
You
cool. I hope.
you've just reminded me too, and this will kind of be a segue, I guess, into my back to my question, my next question for you.
Okay.
So the one of the other very significant one-on-one sessions I've had is with my aforementioned friend Elijah. So I've mentioned this before too. I know to you, but I don't know if it's come up on the podcast yet. But my friend Elijah ran for our home group a 42 to 45 session Vampire the Masquerade campaign,
Right.
which I, many of us in that home game group still think is the best storytelling and the best campaign we've ever done. Like, and Elijah is a masterful DM. He's helped me with the like professional DMing gigs that
Hmm.
we've had in the Bay Area here too. So he's amazing. And one I still remember to this day. It's funny too how the specific memories of what exactly happened are kind of gone, but the feeling of it is always there. So we had been playing in this Vampire the Masquerade campaign for I think it was like 30 sessions in at this point, and we got to a point where Elijah decided that he wanted to run these one-on-one sessions, even though it had been a group normal campaign where we're all together.
Okay.
But he decided, hey, we've kind of reached a period where your characters can separate and work on their own things for a while. Um, and so what he the solo session he ran for me is he created a situation in which my character got to live out a version of her life where she did not make some sort of major campaign changing decision. And like every single NPC, see, I don't even remember what the decision I made was.
Mm.
But essentially the feeling was he just dropped me in. I had my own little home base with the Nosferatu clan, which is what my character belonged to, and just the simplicity and the dynamic that it created of all the NPCs had changed because of that one thing.
Mm.
Their perspectives, their even parts of their personalities
Yeah.
had all shifted, even though it was the same location, same timeline, same whatever. Um, just that shift created an entirely new RP scenario, and it just blew my mind. And because then from there, I realized, wow, like how so much has changed just in my home base. What's the rest of the world like in this
Yeah.
alternate universe, you know? So that was amazing. I have to talk to him about that again so he can remind me all the details of it. But that actually segues me into my question for you,
Okay.
which is having to do with, my friend Elijah sort of ran an alternate universe twist for me that was crazy and mind blowing and really memorable.
Okay.
So, my question for you is, in your many years of GMing, is there a, I guess, genre or theme of story that you have not done yet that you, thinking about it, really want to try or do? And so, some examples, everything from a heist or political intrigue, time travel, pirate slash naval adventure, or war or romance or Feywild stuff or whatever. Is there
Mm-hmm.
some, either even just as a single session, a one shot or whatever, or a full campaign based around that theme that you feel like you haven't really explored yet, but it's been on your mind, or you'd be interested to try it?
Yeah, well, I have my upcoming Fey political intrigue romance war spanning. Well, no, I'm just
Oh
making it
wow, yeah, that's great.
like,
Yeah,
oh great, that's
let's tell the audience
no.
about it. Where's
Um
it? Yeah.
no, like so no, I'm just joking. No, it's like some of that stuff like the time travel stuff, I'm like, it
Mm,
doesn't really turn my crank. The romance, but and I mean, I do love political intrigue, but I feel like I get a fair bit of that. I try to infuse that into a lot of the stuff that I do anyway. In fact, the Gray Shade RPG based on my IP
yeah.
deals with some of that political intrigue that Brandon O'Brien, the designer, and I have been sort of talking about with that game. So I love that stuff, but that's not like I've been able to do a fair bit of that.
Right.
I would say the biggest thing that you mentioned, which I actually am thinking about, and in fact the book that I got specifically for this,
Hmm.
and you know the details of this because you know where it came from, is this, which is this Keys from the Golden
Oh
Vault.
yeah. Yep.
Um, and I read a lot about the fact that a lot of people were like, I don't know whether you can make this into a campaign. And I'm like, look, I'll make it into a
Yeah,
campaign
you
if I have
can.
to,
You
right?
can.
Because they're like, but it's just the same thing over and over again. I'm like, I'm sorry, do you have a problem with leverage? Because if you don't have a problem with leverage, like I'm here to tell you, that's the same thing over and over again, like really. But anyway, so I'm going to think about that. So yes, I do like the heist tale. I love Ocean's 11. I
Mm.
love sort of I've talked about this before. I like competence porn, right? Like people who are just so freaking good at something that you're just like, let me just settle into the enjoyment of watching someone know what the hell they're doing. Um and like it's
Oh my
and
god.
I love spy tales for that reason. I actually would love to run, and I did run a little bit of this in a campaign that I ran called Assignment Impossible, that ran for about maybe 3, 4 sessions, which was basically based on like Mission Impossible TV show scripts even.
Oh wow.
I loved that because you could get all of this like stuff from the time period and you could like kind of bring them. I mean, that stuff was great. And I used it with John Wick's Wilderness of Mirrors system, which was very open ended
John
and
Wicks.
yeah, not the same John Wick. I start out by going, I'm thinking I'm back. No, it's
Yeah.
different John Wick.
Yeah.
But the game designer. But like so Wilderness of Mirrors. And I like I love doing that. So I would not mind coming back. I love spy stuff in general. So I
Mm,
would not mind coming back to something like that in the future. But the heist stuff is also really appealing to me for the same reason. And so I would love to be able to do that. Now, the thing about a heist thing is, and this is something which I think Eberron has taught me, is that Eberron focuses a lot on sort of the group patron thing, where
right.
you're working together as a group. Um, I have to say that's enormously refreshing because it cuts down a little bit on the, we are all 5 or 6 totally disparate entities that have nothing to do with each other. And so a lot of what we're going to do is spend time sort of like dealing with the friction of, well, I don't want to go that way because I believe this, this, and this. And like
Yeah.
that can be interesting, but after a while, you're just like, oh God,
Mm.
guys, can we just like,
Have some
can,
unification. Yeah.
yeah, and so Eberron really short circuits a lot of that by just saying you are a group of newspaper people, or you are members of this merchants guild, or you are, in this case, the one that I'm running online is Oracle of War, and these people are part of the King's Citadel. They chose that they wanted to do this, basically like this
Mm, yeah.
special forces operation
Just buy
type of stuff.
in like at the
Um,
start.
yeah, and that like makes a real difference, because it means that they're sort of immediately together with that stuff. So
Right.
that is something which really helps, and that I think is what you'd need to make something like this work. Because if you just get a bunch of I'm only in it for me, Jack, like, and it's all chaotic,
Yeah.
neutral, like, individual, I don't, that is going to fall apart pretty quickly. You could do it as a one shot and have a blast, I think, but
Yeah.
as an extended campaign,
Yeah.
it would get real old. So I think I would like to be able to do something where you have a heist where it really is heist stuff being done for the right reasons, being done for a group sort of like motivation, being done for a group kind of goal, so
Hmm.
that it's not quite, which doesn't mean that you don't have individual goals, and it doesn't mean that there can't be friction. Of course there can. Like all families, families will have friction, but it's about whether or not you're going to make yourself focus everything on this is what my character would do, when those things kind of break down and you get the, well, this is what my character would do, and
Yeah.
that basically is shorthand for I'm going to do what I want selfishly because I don't really care about what everyone else is doing. Fortunately, I have not run into that too much because I make it clear that I don't want to play with the this is what my character would do player. Like I want
Right.
people who are team players, and even when they have individual goals, and I think it's totally cool to have that, and when there's friction with other people about how to achieve something, if the value structure is wildly different, I don't know that I really want to DM that game. Like
Yeah.
if you have the sort of hardcore, like kill everything that moves and, let the gods sort it out, versus the I am a super ultra pacifist and like under no circumstances would I do XYZ. I don't
Hmm.
know that that's really sustainable in the long term. So I'd love to do heist stuff. I'd love to do a heist campaign. I am thinking about which of my groups, whenever they finish what they're going through now, could run through something like this. But I
Mm,
really do think when I do, I want to push that group concept, and they can decide what group that is.
right.
And also, I can push the group concept with the recognition that I don't expect them to, like break off into 7,000 different directions, but I also don't expect them to subsume their own personalities and just like not have a good time. I want them to be able to express themselves, to be able to have friction when they need to or whatever, but I still want them to be thinking of what's the overall goal that we're all searching for. So if you can do that with this, like that would be cool. Cause I mean, there's a lot of really neat stuff
Yep.
in this that I'd love to be able to do. So
I've
that's what I want.
run.
Competence porn, man. Competence
Yep.
porn.
I've run one of them.
Have you from
There's
Golden Heist?
Yep, yep. As a professional campaign for I think
From
we
Golden Vault, I mean. Yeah.
six
Oh yeah, no,
sessions.
that's right. You told me this. Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super
It
cool.
went well. They chose one of the routes that got them in pretty quickly and got them out pretty quickly. And as always, you think almost everything D&D publishes now is not as challenging as it needs to be, for how powerful the player characters are getting,
Yeah,
especially if they know what they're doing,
yeah.
so they pretty much steamrolled through all the biggest boss fights even after I tried to upgrade the stuff. But yeah, no, that's great. I and this is my first hearing too about the whole Eberron group patron thing. Now, yeah,
I love that so much.
you said group patron, and then you talked a lot about like group unification belonging to a organization.
Hmm.
But in also in Eberron, is there like a patron, a specific individual that is
Yeah,
like their
there is
their
that too. So like they,
caretaker or something?
yeah, because so they chose to be the King Citadel, like this elite group. They
Hmm.
technically report to the King of Breland, a guy named King Borinel. Um, and you know, I don't want to spoil, but they may or may not come into contact with that person at some point.
Yeah.
But the person that's been their sort of contact on the ground, and I've been really happy actually that we did it this way, is a guy named Talar Brasal, who is this person who was a person that basically served with one of the players in the last war and is now like one of their kind of their technical superior, like their handler,
Yeah,
basically,
their
right?
retainer.
Like,
That's the word I
yeah,
was
yeah,
looking
yeah.
for.
But the thing is, he's kind of got this southern drawl, and he's kind of a very laid back. And I have really done everything I can to make him sort of like the Chris Christopherson in Blade character. Like I've made him so that
Yeah.
you're gonna have to struggle not to like him. Like the
Yeah.
idea is, I really want them to feel kind of invested in him, because when there is danger or when there is something that might happen, they're just like, wait, Halar's there? No, F that, you know, they're like grabbing all their stuff ready to go. And that really provides, so that's an example of, that is the equivalent really of their patron, or a close to it. And it really connects them, it really unifies them, I think, because of the relationships that they have with Hilar. And it's also given me a little bit of an out where sometimes, if they're like, and I you know, I want to let them, I don't railroad, so I want them to go, you know, where they want to go and figure things out in the way they want to figure it out. But the mission focus really helps kind of clear the head sometimes. And it means that when Hilar delivers it in that kind of laid back, you know, listen, you
Mm.
got to go the way you want to take this. But to be honest with you, if we're going to try to deal with the prospect of war with Thrain, we're not going to be doing it on the west side of town. There's got to be a moment you go in, you know, like it's just sort of like very, I'm just going to talk very
Yeah.
reasonably. And they're like, you know, you're right, Hilar Brasal. Like, I have to be very careful about how
Who
I
are
do
we
that.
to
But
challenge you? Yes.
yeah, yeah, but there are moments where that's helpful to sort of have that almost like I don't know, mouthpiece or something,
Right.
where you know, sort of some other person to bounce their ideas off of. So yeah, so I love the group patron idea in Eberron. I love the sort of group idea in Eberron, and I don't know why it's specific to Eberron. You know, you could do this anywhere. I just think that Eberron has this. Eberron does a lot of things very well. The way that it does the world building, the way that it reconfigures, the way you think of a halfling or the way you think of an elf. I mean, I
Yeah.
Eberron is like Ravnica is for you. Eberron is for me. Like that's
Yeah.
arguably my favorite setting. And part of it is that it does things so unusually, but part of it also is it just has this focus on like, I don't know, units, divisions, groups, you know,
Yeah.
kind of the elite organizations. And as I say, some of them, like they could have chosen to be like newspaper people, like, and the whole thing, then the campaign would have been in a whole different direction, because it would have been all about like reporting the news from the front and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
Like they could have been like that, or it could have been a guild of all exclusively, you know, clerics that are trying to wipe out the scourge of the undead to prevent a repeat of the last war or whatever.
Right.
Like instead, by doing it this way, there is this sense of they're working for a nation. They also have their own past they have to contend with. They also get frustrated with each other, but also are like completely have each other's backs, and like, and all of that is set against this backdrop of with Hilar and with the higher ups in Braylon. So yeah, I have really enjoyed that experience of doing that. So if I could replicate that in a like a heist
Yeah.
environment, that would be, yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, group
I
patrons.
I I had one of my home group friends, Dramone, who's in the same group as Elijah, and all of us have played together. He also loves Eberron. You guys would probably have a great time talking about Eberron together. And he's run us in Eberron a couple times, but one of the one shots that is actually pretty in the forefront of my repertoire that I run like professionally, or if I just need something to run, is one that I designed from a prompt in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft book that came
Okay,
out,
okay, yeah.
and it's called Sire 1313. You know how in
Mm,
Eberron, Sire exploded everything?
Yep.
or
One of the
seer.
players, one of the characters in the campaign is from there.
Yeah. And so the concept that they wrote out in this book, because Van Richten's Guide is just full of domains of dread, like Barovia, right? So one that they created is essentially this ghost train. That the pitch for it is that as Sire was going through the morning, this is all Eberron stuff for those of you that
Yeah, the
know
morning
about
and the
Eberron,
Mournland, the Gray, as they
right?
call it there.
This train was heading out of. It was the last train out of Sire,
Hmm.
and as it was leaving, it got caught in the explosion, the calamity of the morning, and was then transversed into its own domain of dread. And so it has never stopped, and it just rockets through
Wow.
other domains of dread. So occasionally, if you're in Barovia running Curse of Strahd, like it would make sense with that model then to have this ghost train suddenly appear, run for a certain distance, then disappear. So how I run
Wow.
the one shot is the characters are in a location doing something. This train essentially runs them over, and they end up in one of the train cars. And there are people inside who are ghosts but don't appear as ghosts, that are all crammed inside because they are the last like survivors during this apocalypse that tried to jump on this train and leave the city. And so it's like this investigation of them like figuring out, okay, where are we, why are we in a train, who are these people. I have all these NPCs like, oh, a noble from the city who
Right.
is stuck
Right.
in a cargo car because that's all he could hop on before the train left, and
Right.
his warforged bodyguards, and this woman who was an apprentice at the last mage academy in Sire, and all this stuff. And then they go to the next train car, and there's some argument between people that are in there, and then suddenly the train says, oh, now arriving in Barovia, or now arriving in, there's all, that whole book is just full of domains of dread.
Right. Right.
So
Right. That's interesting.
yeah, I've run that maybe 4 or 5 times, and one of them professionally too. And I've run like a version for teens as well. And it's always really cool to see them figure it out. And then there's sudden combat, and you're on a train, and
Hmm.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
there's
So
a
that's
lot of
my
stuff that's kind
Eberron
of a good
experience.
source. That's
Yeah.
that's a good source for like adventure and excitement. Do
Mhm.
you have a particular thing that you've like, I've always wanted to do this in a game
Um.
point of view?
Hmm. Well, of the things I've mentioned, um, one of the characters in a campaign I'm running right now is a pirate, and or has a very piratey theme. So I've kind of heading in that direction.
Hmm.
I've run one of the keys from the Golden Vault modules entirely, so I've done the heist. Um, Political intrigue, I haven't gotten too much into, and neither with war. But I don't know. I suppose, unlike you, as you said that war, time travel and romance, you're like
Yeah.
nonplussed about. But time travel, I'm really into. I know in the last 10 years or so, this every movie's doing this multiverse thing now.
Yeah.
Spearheaded by Marvel, but the concept of variations and variants, and multiverses and stuff, is interesting to me. And like I said, one of the examples I brought up earlier of a single session that Elijah ran for me, showing an alternate universe of the campaign we were already in, just as a single one shot,
Yeah.
was so cool.
That's pretty neat.
So yeah, I like those concepts. I enjoy how time can mess with things like that. And I guess one of the home game I'm preparing to run, I guess without spoiling anything in case any of my players from that future
Hmm.
game listen to this. I
Yeah,
don't
we should put
know.
a disclaimer up about that with all of our players, right?
Yeah, I guess so. The one shot I'm preparing, uh yeah, I'll just tell them not to listen to this if it's out. But essentially the first 2 sessions that they run through are kind of for them to get to know each other as a group, and kind of starting to set the pieces of the chessboard of the rest of the
Right.
campaign. And the first 2 sessions, they realize after they've concluded like this prologue, that they're actually in the memories of their future selves.
Oh,
And
wow.
in the third or fourth session, whenever they've finished the prologue, based on the events that happen at the end of the prologue, they then sort of have this realization and wake up, where I've taken a lot of inspiration from, The Matrix, where
Right.
it's like he's living his life, and then suddenly he realizes he's actually in a whole other
Yep.
universe entirely. So it's that sort of thing that's going on. And so I'm very interested to see how they go through with it too, because in some ways they're going to be my beta testers if I ever go to release this. I have no idea how they're going to
Right.
react to anything, but um, so yeah, I really like the time travel, multiverse, what if kind of ideas. But I guess to close us out too, between time travel and romance, what is it in particular about them that you're not that interested
Oh,
in exploring
well,
or
I mean, with time travel, the issue is there's a couple issues. I mean, it's time travel is very hard to do well, I
yeah,
think. And I think it's very hard to do I think it's easy to do like crappy time travel,
yeah,
where like there's the one thing you do wrong and then that changes everything,
the
like the Back to the
butterfly
Future kind
effect.
of style.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Or the idea that you would go back in time and then would you kill Hitler or would you kill this like whatever,
yeah,
like the very sort of like there's kind of like the basic level stuff. And then the other thing is that it's kind of the problem that I sometimes have with comics and frankly a little bit with multiverse stuff. It's
yeah.
hard not to feel like that's just basically giving them excuse to be able to like not worry about continuity, like sure whatever,
Mm,
like just it's like playing with Lego toys, right? And like it's fine to play with Legos, like that's cool, but when you're trying to put together narratives, like after a while you're kind of like,
yeah.
where are the stakes? Like it doesn't really matter because they're dead here, but they're
Or more
alive in
like
like
when are
650
the
million other
stakes?
universes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why when you get something like Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse, I still don't fully understand. I think those movies are spectacularly good, and
Hmm.
I still don't fully get how they're able to do that. Like on a certain level, it's all about like these just multiple characters and multiple, but they establish the stakes of the world. They make you care about the characters that they focus in on.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's brilliantly well paced and all that other kind of stuff. But most of the time travel I find is just kind of lazy and a cop out. And I
Right.
don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time worrying about past or future, when I kind of want to focus on the present moment of the game. So that's just
Yes,
my
sir.
thing.
Yep.
As far as the romance is concerned, I mean, that's I I guess like certainly romantic things between characters or one character an NPC or whatever, like that's totally fine. If that stuff
Hmm.
comes up, that's not a problem. But doing it as like a consistent thing is just not.
Yeah. To be honest, I just kind of looked up, genres and themes and just pick some out. Yeah, I don't know how you do a romance themed D&D campaign. Actually, I'm
I
sure it's
could see
possible.
it if
Aren't
you had
there
played.
there are like total tabletop games that are based off of that.
Yep, yep.
Um,
And that have this
yeah.
very sort of like poignant, a lot of like powered by the apocalypse like based
Hmm.
things or fate core based things where it's like very like narrative driven and like that's fine. I think there is for people who want to play that way and who are like into that sort of thing. I think that's great. I think there's something, and maybe this is my own deal. It feels like a little private, and I don't mean that people don't like bare their soul in RPGs, that God knows they do,
Yeah.
but it feels a little bit private and sort of difficult to provide context. Like you can have this person, that you love or that you care for deeply, romantically, physically, intimately, whatever the sort of desire is that you're sort of expressed for this person. But it's
Hmm.
sort of hard, it seems to me, to translate that to an audience that just is kind of like okay, like what's the big deal. They can do it on one shots, they can do it sometimes kind of in the abstract, like so and so cares for so and so, but the
Yeah.
notion of a full out romance, like world sweeping campaign, I don't know that that's the kind of thing that people are really going to get the context for unless they're actually those people,
Right.
and watching it from a distance, they may find those people interesting in a certain way. And certainly people like reading romance novels, but it feels like they're reading a romance novel with a set narrative as opposed to watching a game which can veer off course and go all in these, wildly different
Yeah.
directions.
Yeah.
And so, and you may not, and I mean, if you're going to provide stakes, if you're going to make it so that there are potential losses that could happen, romance itself, like romance literature, like the first and only commandment is that there shall be a happy ending. Like
Hmm.
romances have to have happy endings. You can have movies that have lots of love and that are tragic, and that's fine. But if you have a romance, that romance had better, have a happy ending in the end. And you can't guarantee that in a D&D game, right? Like probably not without reducing, it seems to me, the stakes that are involved. So, and as far as the physical intimacy piece, I'm here to tell you that I am not interested in watching that be role playing it myself. Like, I'll pass, thanks.
Of course.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's why. I mean, like, but it's nothing against either genre. Like, I mean, those are perfectly suitable. I just think it would be hard in the romantic sense, in the romance genre, to get something like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
longer term. It seems to me.
Yeah. I don't know.
So
Yeah, I don't know either how one would theme that. I guess, if you had characters that maybe you could have a campaign where you have the core story of the campaign, like maybe it's keys from the Golden Vault, but also it's different because the two main characters are like husband and wife or something. And so there's like that
yeah.
added dynamic.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Like, and that I can totally see. Like, and I've run stuff like that before where you have
Mhm.
like a couple, but it feels like romance, like there's the assumption that part of the arc is the love, falling in love with each other type of
Right.
thing,
Or
and so
yeah, like
like
in romance films, how like usually romance films are two people that don't know each other at all go from strangers to the end of the film. Now they're married, and everything.
right,
So like that story of them falling in love.
right.
That would be hard. Like if that was the intention of the campaign is we're going to tell a story about two characters falling in love. Like, yeah, that would be
And
really
and
interesting
if
to
they know
try, but
that, yeah, like, and if the players know that, like, how forced is that, right? Like,
right, right.
how are they sitting like, well, now the time that I initiate a do I
Yeah.
kiss this person? Maybe I shouldn't. Like, I don't. It
Yeah.
just feels like it doesn't. And again, if you have the players for it, if you have like, if everyone sat down and discussed it and agreed to what, that's fine. Like, I mean, there's no
Hmm.
like moral wrong about it. Certainly, it's just that it feels to me like, to raise the stakes the way you need to raise them to keep the game interesting, um, is not really compatible with a we guarantee they'll be together at the end of all this.
Yeah.
And so
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd want to see. I'm sure it's out there. I'd want to see a campaign where, romance is at least like a heavy
Yeah.
theme or influence, but maybe not the main thing. I don't
Well,
know.
Vampire the Masquerade probably has an element of that's involved, right? I mean, I would
I
assume.
mean, not mechanically in any way more than D&D does. I mean,
Okay.
it's by the provenance that Vampire the Masquerade is usually set in a modern setting, maybe, um, and because that makes it more familiar for the players, and so um, yeah, I mean, there was like in our 45 session VTM campaign, there was some romance, but it never really, yeah, it was never really a main theme at all. It kind of just
Okay.
felt like a little, it's like now, I mean, what romance is there in a Marvel movie? I don't know, not really a lot. None of them really, other than Iron Man. He has his wife and he has kids. Like that's it. That's it. And it doesn't really have anything. He's a dad for the last part of his little story there. But
Right.
yeah, so anyway, yeah, interesting. There's a lot of themes out there too,
Yeah.
and I think I'm curious to see. I really want to see how this Eberron, or sorry, the Beowulf thing goes with
Yeah.
the
Me too.
duets um and everything. But yeah,
Me too. And I'm interested to see, to hear from you about how the duet stuff that you're doing, like the sort of solo stuff that you're doing,
right,
tying that big into sort of the larger group stuff, because I imagine, you will come
yeah,
back to the larger group with that, how that stuff plays in, the idea of sort of zooming in the camera and the one person zooming it back out. I think that's pretty neat.
yeah. We'll
So,
see. I'm
yeah.
I'm interested to see. That's the one silver lining of schedule conflicts is if you have one person that can't make it. I mean, I'm going to be trying this, so I'll report back. But my idea is, we have one or two people that can't make it, but a whole group that's ready and ready to go. So seeing if you can't make those one or two people, um, some sort of influential NPC or a patron or something
Right.
like that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
And it gives them the idea, anything that sort of like alters their perspective, so they
yeah,
don't just see the world kind of through the myopic lens of only their own character, is kind of neat. So,
yeah.
yeah, it'll be cool.
All right, I guess that's it. And we will see all of you in the next one. We we'll have better intros and outros at some point.
We're getting there. We're getting
We're
there.
getting there.
We're
Yeah.
getting there.
All right, it's
Bye, everybody.
over. Bye.